I'm Hannah, 29, a wedding photographer who captures perfect moments for others, while my own life has been anything but picture perfect. Growing up with Catherine, my perfectionist mother taught me to smile through anything, but nothing prepared me for hearing her whisper, "I regret ever having you," at my own wedding reception. The room seemed to freeze as those 6 words shattered the facade we'd maintained for years. What happened next changed everything. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members? Let me know in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else feeling alone right now. My childhood in Brookline, a leafy suburb of Boston, looked idyllic from the outside. Our colonial-style home with its manicured lawn and seasonal wreaths projected the perfect image my mother Catherine so desperately cultivated. She was a corporate attorney at a prestigious downtown firm, known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Winning was everything to her, in the courtroom and social circles, and especially in parenting. My earliest memories are tinged with anxiety, the constant feeling of being evaluated and usually found wanting. By age 5, I was enrolled in ballet piano lessons and French tutoring. My weekends weren't for play dates or cartoons. They were meticulously scheduled for enrichment activities and practice. "Potential without discipline is worthless," my mother would say whenever I complained about the grueling schedule. "Do you want to be ordinary, Hannah? Because ordinary people accomplish nothing." My father, Michael, was the buffer between Catherine's exacting standards and my childhood need for approval. A professor of literature at Boston College, he brought a gentler energy to our home, sneaking me ice cream after particularly harsh criticism from my mother and teaching me to find joy in small moments. He loved Catherine deeply but recognized her intensity could be damaging. "Your mother pushes because she wants the best for you," he would explain, tucking me into bed after I'd cried over a B+ on a math test. She doesn't always express it well, but that's her way of showing love. I wanted to believe him, but even at 8 years old, I sensed the difference between pushing someone to succeed and making them feel perpetually inadequate. When I was 10, I participated in a regional piano competition. After months of practice, sacrificed playtime, and even a cancelled birthday party to prepare, I placed second. Most parents would have been proud. Catherine refused to speak to me for 3 days. "You weren't focused enough," she finally said on the 4th day. "You let nerves get the better of you. Second place is just the first loser." That night, after everyone was asleep, I crept downstairs and stared at the silver trophy that wasn't good enough. Something shifted in me then, a realization that I would never earn her unconditional approval. No achievement would ever be sufficient. Photography became my refuge around age 12 when my father gave me his old Canon camera. Through the viewfinder, I controlled what was captured and what was left out. I could frame the world as I saw it, not as others demanded it should be. I documented everyday beauty that my mother would typically overlook as ordinary morning light, filtering through kitchen blinds, my father's hands as he turned pages of a book neighborhood, kids playing in sprinklers during summer. "What a waste of film," Catherine commented when I proudly showed her my first developed roll. "If you're going to take pictures, at least photograph something worthwhile." By high school, I had perfected the art of appearing perfect, while nurturing a private self my mother couldn't criticize. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, captained the debate team, played first-chair violin in the orchestra, and secretly submitted my photography to contests under a pseudonym. I developed what my therapist would later identify as high-functioning anxiety, and achieving at exceptional levels while internally crumbling under the pressure. My graduation should have been a moment of triumph. As valedictorian, I delivered a speech about finding your authentic voice amidst societal pressures. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Everyone except Catherine, who sat stiffly in her designer suit, lips pursed. "Your metaphors were mixed," she said afterward, adjusting my cap, which had slightly tilted. "And you should have projected more confidence. Your voice trembled twice." My father squeezed my shoulder. "I thought it was beautiful, Hannah. I've never been prouder." Later that night, as graduation parties raged across town, I sat on our back porch alone, scrolling through college information. I had been accepted to several prestigious East Coast universities, but also to UCLA, with a partial scholarship for their arts program. My mother naturally expected Harvard, or at least Yale, but looking at the California campus photos, something pulled at my heart. "You can't seriously be considering UCLA," Catherine said, finding me on the porch. "It's practically a state school. What would be the point of all your hard work if you throw away your future like that?" Maybe my future looks different than what you've planned, I replied, surprising myself with the defiance in my voice. She laughed dismissively. You don't even know what you want yet, Hannah. Trust me on this. But for once, I did know. 3,000 miles of distance from Catherine's disapproving gaze seemed exactly what I needed. When I announced my decision to attend UCLA, the ensuing argument lasted weeks. My father eventually intervened. Let her go, Catherine, he said during a particularly heated dinner. She's earned the right to choose. Fine, my mother replied icily, but don't come running home when you realize your mistake. As I packed that August, carefully wrapping my camera equipment, I wondered if there would ever be a version of me that Catherine could simply love without conditions. The question followed me onto the plane across the country toward a future that for the first time felt like my own. The California sun greeted me like an old friend when I arrived at UCLA, warming my Boston pale skin and seemingly melting years of tension from my shoulders. My dorm room was half the size of my bedroom at home, with cinder block walls and a roommate from San Diego named Tara, who had blue hair and more confidence than I'd ever seen in someone our age. You look like you need a proper welcome to the West Coast, she declared after we'd unpacked. We're going to the beach, no excuses. That first day set the tone for my college experience, saying yes to experiences my mother would have deemed frivolous or impractical. Building sandcastles at Santa Monica, midnight taco trucks, impromptu road trips to Joshua Tree, photography excursions to capture California light that seemed to transform everything it touched. In my photography classes, professors encouraged experimentation rather than technical perfection. One instructor, Professor Martinez, changed my perspective entirely when he returned my technically flawless but emotionally vacant portfolio. Your technical skills are impressive, Hannah, he said, but where are you in these images? What are you trying to say? When I admitted I didn't know that I'd focused on getting everything right, he smiled sadly. Photography isn't about being right. It's about being true. Stop shooting what you think others want to see. Show us what you see. That assignment became a turning point. I began photographing subjects that resonated emotionally. Elderly couples holding hands on park benches, the weathered faces of street vendors, children experiencing ocean waves for the first time. My work took on a narrative quality, telling stories of genuine human connection. For the first time, I wasn't trying to win approval. I was expressing my authentic vision, and paradoxically, that authenticity began winning recognition. My photos were selected for the student gallery, then a local exhibition. Catherine's response to these achievements was predictably tepid. During our weekly Sunday calls, she would listen to my excited updates, then pivot to questions about my grades in real classes, or whether I'd considered transferring to a more reputable institution. Photography is a hobby, Hannah, she said repeatedly. It's not a career path for someone with your capabilities. But with 3,000 miles between us, her words had less power. I was building a community that valued me for who I was, not what I achieved. My roommate Tara introduced me to her circle of friends, creative, supportive people who celebrated each other's successes without competition. Among them was Eliza, a film student who became my best friend and first real confidant. Your mum sounds like she has narcissistic tendencies, Eliza observed after I shared stories from home. Have you ever thought about how that's affected you? I hadn't, but once she mentioned it, I couldn't stop seeing the patterns. How I apologized constantly. How I deferred to others' opinions, how I still sought validation even from strangers, how uncomfortable I felt receiving compliments or setting boundaries. Graduation approached faster than I could have imagined. I had maintained excellent grades while developing my photography portfolio, interning with a renowned wedding photographer named Diane who saw potential in my work. You have a gift for capturing authentic moments, Diane told me. Technical skills can be taught, but that intuitive understanding of human connection is rare. She offered me a position as her second shooter after graduation, a stepping stone that could launch my career. When I called home with the news, my father was enthusiastic, but Catherine's disapproval came through clearly. Taking pictures at parties, she sighed. Is that really what you want to do with your expensive education? I let her words roll off me, a new skill I was developing. Actually, yes, it makes me happy. Happy doesn't pay student loans, she retorted, but I was determined to prove her wrong. After graduation, I moved into a tiny apartment in Los Angeles. With Eliza, worked with Diane on weekends and took corporate photography gigs during the week to pay the bills. Within 2 years, I had enough experience and savings to launch my own wedding photography business. My approach differed from many in the industry. Rather than highly posed formal shots, I specialized in authentic storytelling, capturing the small, genuine moments that made each wedding unique. A father blinking back tears, grandparents dancing to their song, children experiencing the magic of celebration. My website showcased these emotional narratives, and clients who wanted that authenticity began seeking me out specifically. Then James walked into my life as unexpectedly as California sunshine after a lifetime of Boston winters. I was photographing his cousin's wedding, an elegant affair at a Malibu vineyard. As the second shooter, I was capturing guest reactions during the ceremony when I noticed him. Tall with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, watching the proceedings with genuine emotion rather than the bored expression many single men wear at weddings. Later during the reception, he approached while I was adjusting my camera settings. "You must see a lot of these," he said, gesturing around the reception. "Do they all start to look the same after a while?" I looked up, prepared to give my standard polite response, but something about his genuine curiosity made me answer honestly. "Never," I replied. "Each one is someone's most important day. Different people, different stories. It's like having a front row seat to the best moments in strangers' lives." We talked until my break ended about architecture, his profession photography, and our shared love of mid-century design. When I mentioned I was documenting historic buildings in downtown LA as a personal project, he offered to show me some hidden architectural gems. "For the project, of course," he added with a smile that suggested more. 3 days later, we met for what became our first date, exploring forgotten Art Deco masterpieces while discussing everything from childhood dreams to favorite breakfast foods. With James, conversation flowed effortlessly. He listened, truly listened, when I spoke something I wasn't accustomed to from my family dynamic. "You see the world differently," he observed as I photographed an ornate doorway most people would walk past. "You notice beauty in overlooked places." Over the next few months, our relationship deepened. I met his parents, Susan and Robert, during a casual Sunday dinner that bore no resemblance to the formal, tension-filled meals of my childhood. They asked questions about my photography with genuine interest, displayed no judgment when I mentioned my modest apartment, and treated James with a relaxed affection that made me realize how abnormal my own upbringing had been. "Your parents are amazing," I told James afterward. "So supportive and kind." "Aren't most parents, but..." he asked, then caught himself seeing my expression. "I'm sorry, I know yours are different. Different indeed." When James travelled to Boston to meet them 6 months into our relationship, Catherine subjected him to what felt like a cross-examination over dinner. "Architecture," she said, sipping her wine after he explained his profession. "That's an unstable field, isn't it? Very dependent on economic cycles." "Mom," I interjected, "James works for one of the top firms in California." She smiled thinly. "I'm just making conversation, Hannah. No need to be defensive." Throughout the weekend, she made subtle digs about everything from his East Coast college Cornell, which apparently wasn't Harvard, to his casual mention of growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in San Diego. My father tried to balance her coldness with warmth, but the damage was done. James remained unfailingly polite, but quieter than usual. "I'm so sorry about my mother," I said once we were alone in our hotel room. "She's always like that." "You don't need to apologize for her," James said, taking my hand. "But I do wonder why you tolerate it. You deserve better treatment, Hannah." No one had ever suggested that what I deserved might be different from what I received from Catherine. The concept was revolutionary and terrifying. Our relationship progressed, despite Catherine's lack of enthusiasm. James supported my growing business, celebrated my successes without qualification, and created space for me to heal from patterns I hadn't even recognized as harmful. When difficult emotions surfaced from my childhood, he never minimized them or suggested I should just get over it. After 2 years together during a weekend trip to Big Sur, James proposed at sunset on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The ring was his grandmother's reset with additional small diamonds in a design he'd created himself. "You taught me to see beauty in unexpected places," he said, kneeling before me. "You've shown me what love without conditions looks like. Will you marry me, Hannah?" My yes was immediate and certain. For once, I didn't wonder what anyone else would think of my decision. It was entirely mine, born of love, rather than obligation or expectation. The call to my parents came the next morning. My father's joy was palpable, his congratulations warm and immediate. Catherine's response was predictably measured. "Well, that's certainly news. She said after a pause. "Have you set a date?" "Not yet, Mum. We just got engaged yesterday." You should consider June. The weather in Boston is lovely then. I'll contact the country club about availability. And just like that, she was attempting to take control. Despite being 3,000 miles away and 7 years removed from her daily influence, I felt myself slipping into old patterns of acquiescence. Actually, I said, forcing confidence into my voice, we're thinking about a California wedding. James's family is here, and most of our friends... Nonsense, she interrupted. A bride gets married in her hometown. That's tradition. James, overhearing the conversation, gave me an encouraging nod. We'll figure out the details and get back to you, I said more firmly this time. I just wanted to share our news. After hanging up, I sat quietly processing the interaction. Are you okay? James asked gently. I think so, I replied. I just realized I was hoping that this, of all things, might finally be the moment my mother would simply be happy for me, without conditions or criticisms. He pulled me into a hug. I think it's okay to hope for that, and it's okay to be disappointed when it doesn't happen. But please don't let her reaction dim your joy. I nodded against his chest, wondering if planning a wedding might somehow bridge the gap between my mother and me. Perhaps sharing this milestone could help her see me as an adult, deserving of respect rather than a perpetual disappointment. Perhaps finally we could connect as two women rather than as critic and criticized. It was a beautiful, naive hope. The engagement euphoria lasted approximately 72 hours before Catherine launched into full wedding planning mode. Despite my clear statement that we were considering California, she emailed a spreadsheet listing 5 potential Boston venues, complete with available dates and deposit requirements. I've taken the liberty of reserving the second Saturday in June at the Rosewood Club, she announced during our next call. They rarely have openings, but the manager is an old client of mine. Mum, we haven't decided on location yet, I protested. James and I were thinking of a beachside ceremony in Malibu. A beach wedding? Her voice dripped with disdain. Sand in your dress, wind in your hair, sunburned guests. That's not a proper wedding, Hannah. The words proper wedding became her mantra over the following weeks. According to Catherine, a proper wedding required engraved invitations, a seated 5-course dinner, a live string quartet, and a guest list populated by people I barely knew, but who occupied important positions in Boston society. James and I tried compromising. We agreed to a Boston wedding to accommodate my parents, but requested a venue with outdoor space and a more relaxed atmosphere than the stuffy country club Catherine preferred. We selected a historic garden estate that offered elegance without pretension. That place is where nouveau riche tech people get married, Catherine dismissed when I sent photos. If we're doing Boston, we should do it properly. Despite my objections, she put down a non-refundable deposit at the Rosewood Club. When I discovered this, during a call with the venue I'd actually chosen, I finally confronted her. Mom, this is our wedding, not yours. You can't just make these decisions without us. I'm paying for it, she replied coolly. That gives me some say in the matter. We never asked you to pay for everything, I countered. James and I can contribute. On a photographer's salary, she laughed dismissively. Hannah, be realistic. Each planning call devolved into similar arguments. The guest list expanded from our desired 80 people to over 200, mostly Catherine's colleagues and social connections. The simple, elegant invitations we selected were rejected in favour of ornate custom stationery that cost more than my first camera. The farm-to-table caterer we loved was dismissed as too casual in favour of a traditional French restaurant. James watched with growing concern as I became increasingly anxious. After one particularly difficult call, where Catherine criticised our choice of wedding colours as trendy and tasteless, he gently suggested we consider other options. We could elope, he offered, or just plan the wedding ourselves and tell your parents when it's done. I shook my head. It would devastate my father if he couldn't walk me down the aisle. Then we need to set firm boundaries with your mother, James said. This is about starting our life together, not fulfilling her social aspirations. I knew he was right, but years of conditioning had made confronting Catherine extremely difficult. My father wasn't much help either. When I called seeking his intervention, he offered sympathy but little action. You know how your mother gets about these things, he said. She just wants your day to be perfect. Her version of perfect, not mine, I replied, frustration building. Dad, I need you to support me on this. I'll talk to her, he promised, as he had countless times throughout my life with minimal results. The situation reached a breaking point during dress shopping. Catherine insisted on accompanying me to Boston's most exclusive bridal salon, where she had pre-selected gowns for me to try. Each was more elaborate than the last. heavy satin ball gowns with cathedral trains beaded corseted affairs that restricted movement, all traditional and formal. What about something simpler? I suggested after the fifth uncomfortable dress. Something I can actually move and dance in. The consultant brought out a sleek modern gown with clean lines and minimal embellishment. Exactly my style. When I emerged from the dressing room, I felt like myself for the first time that day. "That's not a wedding dress," Catherine declared before I could even look in the mirror. "It's practically a nightgown. Everyone would think you didn't respect the occasion enough to dress properly." "I love it," I said, admiring the way the silk draped elegantly. "Well, I'm embarrassed for you," she replied. "I raised you with better taste than this." Something snapped inside me. Years of criticism, of never being good enough, of having my preferences dismissed, culminated in that moment. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I stood on the pedestal in a dress I loved, while my mother looked on with disapproval. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why is nothing I choose ever good enough?" The bridal consultant quietly excused herself, leaving us alone in the elegant fitting room. Catherine appeared genuinely confused by my outburst. "I am happy for you. I'm trying to make sure your wedding is perfect." "No, you're trying to make sure it's perfect by your standards. You haven't asked once what would make me happy." "You don't always know what will make you happy, Hannah," she said as if explaining something to a child. "Sometimes you need guidance." I stepped off the pedestal, careful not to damage the beautiful dress. "I'm buying this one," I said with quiet determination. "And from now on, James and I will be making the decisions about our wedding. You can either support those decisions or not be involved." The drive back to my parents' house was silent. That evening, my father found me packing to return to California earlier than planned. "Your mother means well," he said, his standard defense. "She just expresses it poorly sometimes." "Meaning well isn't enough, Dad," I replied, folding a sweater with more force than necessary. "At some point, impact matters more than intention. She's making what should be one of the happiest times in my life miserable." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "She was raised by extremely critical parents herself, you know. She's repeating patterns she learned." "I understand that," I said, softening slightly. "But I'm trying to break those patterns, not perpetuate them. And I need your help." My father promised again to speak with her, but I left Boston the next morning with little hope that anything would change. James met me at the airport, took one look at my exhausted face, and simply held me. "That bad, why?" he asked as we walked to the parking garage. "Worse," I admitted. "I don't know if we can do this her way, James. It's destroying me." He squeezed my hand. "Then we don't do it her way. Your happiness matters more than her approval." Over the next few months, James and I reclaimed our wedding planning with the support of his parents and my friends. We compromised where we could, keeping the Boston location and the June date Catherine had secured, but insisting on our preferred flowers menu music and overall aesthetic. I wore the dress I loved. We reduced the guest list to people who actually mattered to us. Catherine's displeasure manifested in passive-aggressive comments during planning calls, but I developed a new technique, listening politely, thanking her for her input, and proceeding with our original plans. Each small act of independence strengthened my resolve. The week of the wedding arrived with heightened tensions. The rehearsal dinner hosted by James's parents at a waterfront restaurant should have been a joyful gathering of our closest family members. Instead, Catherine spent the evening criticizing everything from the casual setting to the family-style service. "I could have arranged something at the Harvard Club," she murmured to me between courses. "Something a bit more refined." "This is perfect, Mom," I replied, watching James laugh with his cousins across the table. "Everyone's relaxed and enjoying themselves." She sniffed disapprovingly. "There's such a thing as too casual, Hannah. This feels like a backyard barbecue, not a pre-wedding celebration." I excused myself to the restroom, where I practiced the breathing techniques my therapist had suggested for managing anxiety. James found me there, concerned about my extended absence. "We can leave any time," he offered. "Just say the word." I shook my head. "No, I'm not letting her ruin this too." I returned to the table with renewed determination to enjoy our celebration. When Catherine began another critical comment, I gently interrupted. "Mum, tonight isn't about impressing anyone. It's about celebrating with people we love. Can we focus on that?" Her lips tightened, but surprisingly, she nodded and remained relatively quiet for the remainder of the evening. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June day that seemed designed for new beginnings. As I prepared in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, I felt a mixture of excitement and lingering anxiety. I'd arranged for my mother to join us for the final hour of preparations, hoping for one meaningful connection before the ceremony. When Catherine arrived, she was impeccably dressed in a designer suit the colour of champagne, her makeup flawless, her criticism ready. "Your hair would look better pulled back completely," she said instead of a greeting. "And your bridesmaids' dresses are wrinkled." My maid of honour, Eliza, shot her a look that could have frozen lava. "Everything looks beautiful," she countered firmly. "Especially Hannah." I took a deep breath. "Mom, can we talk privately for a minute?" In the adjoining room, I turned to her with one last hope for understanding. "I know today might not be exactly what you envisioned for me, but it's what James and I want. It would mean everything to me if you could just be happy for us exactly as things are." Catherine adjusted an invisible strand of my hair. "I am happy for you, Hannah. I just want everything to be perfect." "It already is perfect," I said softly, "because I'm marrying the man I love, surrounded by people who care about us. That's all that matters today." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or the briefest acknowledgement of my feelings. But it vanished quickly, replaced by her usual practical efficiency. "We should get you into your dress," she said, turning toward the door. "The photographer will want pre-ceremony portraits soon." It wasn't the mother-daughter moment I'd hoped for, but it was the closest we'd come to understanding in years. I chose to count it as progress. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed, meaningful, personal, filled with genuine emotion. James's eyes, when he saw me walking down the aisle with my father, contained all the validation I'd ever sought. Our vows, written together over late-night cups of tea, spoke of partnership growth and unconditional support. When the officiant pronounced us married, the applause from our guests felt like a collective endorsement of the life we were choosing to build together. The cocktail hour flowed into dinner beneath market lights in the estate's garden. James and I moved from table to table, greeting guests and absorbing their well wishes. When we reached my parents' table, my father embraced me warmly. "You've never looked more beautiful," he said, eyes misty. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Catherine offered a more reserved congratulation, then immediately began pointing out small details she found lacking. The spacing of the centerpieces, the temperature of the appetizers, the timing of the service. "Mum," I interrupted gently, "everything is wonderful. Please just enjoy the evening." She pressed her lips together, but nodded, and I moved on to the next table with James, hoping we'd navigated the most challenging interaction of the night. The moment that would change everything came during the toasts. After heartfelt speeches from James's best man and my maid of honour, I took the microphone to thank our guests, specifically acknowledging our parents for their support. "To my parents," I said, raising my glass toward their table. "Thank you for everything you've done to shape me into the person I am today." It was a carefully worded sentiment, truthful without being effusive. As applause rippled through the crowd, I noticed my mother lean toward the woman beside her, her cousin from Philadelphia, who I'd always found judgmental and cold. I couldn't hear their exchange over the clinking glasses, but James's mother Susan, seated at the next table, clearly could. Her face paled as she looked from Catherine to me, then quickly away. Later, as James and I shared our first dance, I asked, "What happened at my parents' table?" "You look worried." Susan hesitated. "It's nothing you need to think about on your wedding day, sweetheart." "Please tell me," I insisted, already sensing it was important. She sighed. "Your mother, after your toast, she said to her cousin, 'I regret ever having you.'" "I'm so sorry, Hannah. I wouldn't have told you, but I was afraid someone else might." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Those 6 words, "I regret ever having you," confirmed every insecurity I'd battled my entire life. Every suspicion that I was fundamentally unlovable to the one person who should have loved me unconditionally. James felt me stiffen in his arms. "What's wrong?" I told him, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me, his face hardened gaze finding my mother across the room. "I'm going to say something to her," he said, protective anger flashing in his eyes. "No," I replied, continuing our dance with practiced composure. "Not now. This is still our wedding day. She doesn't get to ruin that too." As the song ended, guests applauded, unaware of the devastation beneath my practiced smile. I excused myself, needing a moment alone, and walked with measured steps toward the garden's edge, where fairy lights illuminated a stone pathway. The night air cooled my flushed skin as tears threatened. I heard footsteps behind me and turned expecting James, but found my mother instead. "The photographer is looking for you," she said. "It's time for the cake cutting." I faced her directly, abandoning pretense. "I heard what you said about regretting having me. Catherine's expression flickered between surprise and defensiveness. You shouldn't eavesdrop on private conversations, Hannah. It wasn't eavesdropping when you said it loudly enough for James's mother to hear. Susan should mind her own business, she replied coldly. That's all you have to say, I asked, disbelief colouring my voice. Not a denial, not an apology. Catherine sighed as if I were being unreasonable. You've always been so sensitive, taking everything too personally. You said you regret having me at my wedding. How exactly should I take that? She straightened her perfectly tailored jacket. You've never been satisfied with anything I've done for you. Always pushing back, always wanting things your way. Do you have any idea how difficult you've been? How much easier life would have been without constantly managing your rebellion? Each word landed like a physical blow. This wasn't heat of the moment anger. This was her honest assessment of our relationship, of my existence in her life. I've spent my entire life trying to be good enough for you. I said, my voice breaking despite my determination to remain composed. Nothing I ever did met your standards. Not one achievement was celebrated without criticism attached. And now I understand why. You never wanted me in the first place. You're being dramatic, she dismissed. This is exactly why I can't have honest conversations with you. Everything becomes a production. In that moment, I saw our relationship with perfect clarity. The endless cycle of criticism, my constant striving for approval, that would never come the fundamental brokenness that no amount of effort on my part could repair. I'm done, I said quietly. Done trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Done making myself smaller to accommodate your criticism. Done pretending we have a healthy relationship when we clearly don't. What exactly does that mean? She asked, her voice sharpening. It means I'm going back to my wedding reception to celebrate with people who genuinely care about my happiness. What you do is up to you. I turned and walked away, half expecting her to follow, to apologize, to show some recognition of the damage she'd caused. She didn't. When I glanced back, she was already returning to the reception, composure intact, as if our conversation had been about nothing more significant than the weather. James found me moments later. Are you okay? What happened? I confronted her. I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just defended herself and called me dramatic. His jaw tightened. What do you need right now? I thought about it carefully, then smiled, a real smile despite everything. I need to dance with my husband. I need to cut our cake. I need to celebrate this day with people who actually want to be part of our happiness. And that's exactly what we did. I returned to the reception, determinedly joyful. When my mother approached our table later, I was politely distant, but not confrontational. This wasn't the time or place for the larger conversation we needed to have. My father, sensing tension but unaware of its cause, tried to maintain normalcy with strained cheerfulness. As the night progressed, I noticed Catherine leaving early, claiming a headache. My father apologized, looking torn between staying to fulfill his father-of-the-bride duties and accompanying his wife. Go ahead, Dad, I said, hugging him. We'll talk tomorrow. As James and I left our reception amid sparklers and cheers, I felt oddly lighter. Something painful had ended, yes, but something healthier was beginning. I was walking away from patterns that had damaged me for decades. I was choosing myself finally. The morning after the wedding, James and I gathered with close friends and family for a farewell brunch before departing for our honeymoon. My parents were noticeably absent, which generated curious glances, but few direct questions. James's mother, Susan, squeezed my hand in silent support. Are you disappointed they didn't come? James asked privately as we prepared to leave for the airport. Surprisingly, no, I answered honestly. I feel peaceful. Like I've finally stopped pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Our honeymoon in Bali provided exactly the distance and perspective I needed. Amid ancient temples and terraced rice fields surrounded by a culture that celebrates human connection, I began processing what had happened and what needed to happen next. I think I need to establish clear boundaries with my mother. I told James one evening as we sat on our villa's porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colours. Maybe even take a break from communication for a while. Whatever you decide, I support you, he replied. Just remember, you deserve respect and kindness. Nothing less is acceptable. During long walks on black sand beaches and quiet moments in sacred gardens, I contemplated my childhood, recognizing patterns I'd normalized that were anything but normal. The constant criticism, the conditional approval, the emotional manipulation, the way Catherine had consistently prioritized appearances over authentic connection. I think my mother might have narcissistic personality traits. I said to James after a particularly insightful meditation session at a Balinese retreat. Not just difficult or perfectionist, actually incapable of seeing me as separate from her expectations. That would explain a lot, he agreed. Have you thought about talking to someone professional about it when we get home? I nodded. I think that's my next step. I need tools for dealing with this that I just don't have yet. By the time our plane touched down in Los Angeles 2 weeks later, I had formulated a plan. I would seek therapy specifically focused on healing from narcissistic parental relationships. I would implement limited contact with my mother, structured brief interactions with clear boundaries. I would stop seeking her approval or validation. And most importantly, I would prioritize my own emotional health above maintaining appearances. My father called the day after our return. Your mother's upset that you haven't called. He began, his tone apologetic as usual. Dad, there's something you should know. I replied, then explained what had happened at the wedding, including Catherine's devastating comment and her unapologetic response when confronted. His long silence spoke volumes. I had no idea, he finally said. She told me you were being difficult about photo arrangements. That's not what happened, I said gently. And I think this is just the culmination of a lifetime of similar interactions. I need some space from Mom right now. She's still your mother, Hannah, he protested weakly. Family is family. Yes, she is, but being family doesn't give someone the right to be cruel without consequences. After we hung up, I felt simultaneously sad for my father, trapped in his own dysfunctional dynamic with Catherine, and proud of myself for maintaining my boundary. It was the first of many difficult conversations. Over the next few weeks, Catherine's attempts to contact me escalated from text messages, "We need to discuss your behavior at the wedding," to voicemails. This silent treatment is incredibly immature, to emails, "Your father is distressed by your selfishness." Each message confirmed I was making the right decision by maintaining distance. Meanwhile, I began weekly sessions with Dr. Levine, a therapist specializing in adult children of narcissistic parents. From our very first meeting, she validated experiences I'd questioned my entire life. "What you're describing is emotional abuse," she said matter-of-factly during our initial consultation. "The constant criticism, the withholding of approval, the making everything about her feelings rather than yours. These are classic narcissistic parenting behaviors." Hearing someone name my experience was both painful and liberating. I wasn't overly sensitive or ungrateful. I was responding normally to abnormal treatment. "Your wedding day revelation wasn't coincidental," Dr. Levine explained in a subsequent session. "Major life transitions often bring narcissistic dynamics into sharper focus because they represent your independence, which threatens your mother's sense of control." Through therapy, I began recognizing how deeply Catherine's treatment had affected me. My perfectionism, my anxiety, my difficulty accepting compliments, my tendency to apologize for my existence. I learned techniques for managing interactions with her when they became necessary, and tools for healing the wounded parts of myself that still craved her approval. James supported this journey wholeheartedly, attending several therapy sessions to better understand how he could help. His parents Susan and Robert provided the unconditional parental affection I'd never experienced, welcoming me into their family with open arms and zero expectations. As summer turned to fall, I immersed myself in my photography business, channeling emotional energy into creative expression. I began a personal project documenting family relationships across cultures and generations, parents and children with healthy, loving connections. Each session healed something in me while producing profoundly moving images. Catherine's attempts at contact eventually shifted from anger to guilt. "Your father misses you," she wrote in one email. "His blood pressure is elevated because of this situation you've created." I responded briefly, "I'm sorry to hear Dad isn't feeling well. I'm happy to speak with him any time. My boundaries with you remain unchanged." When the holidays approached, bringing inevitable family expectations, James and I decided to create our own traditions rather than subjecting ourselves to uncomfortable gatherings. We hosted Thanksgiving for friends without family nearby, volunteered at a community dinner on Christmas Eve, and spent Christmas Day with James's family, who had relocated to San Diego after Robert's retirement. My father called on Christmas morning, his voice heavy with sadness. "We miss you, sweetheart. The house feels empty without you." "I miss you too, Dad," I said truthfully, "but I can't pretend everything's okay with Mom when it isn't. Has she acknowledged what happened at the wedding at all?" His hesitation told me everything. "She remembers things differently," he offered lamely. "That's called gaslighting, Dad, and it's not healthy for any of us." Our conversation ended with no resolution, but I felt stronger for having maintained my position. The guilt that would have previously consumed me was present but manageable, another sign of my growing emotional health. January brought unexpected news I was pregnant. James and I had planned to wait another year before starting a family, but this surprise filled us with joy. As I scheduled my first prenatal appointment, I found myself facing a difficult decision, whether to share this news with my parents. "What are you afraid might happen if you tell them?" Dr. Levine asked during our session that week. "That my mother will use this baby as another way to criticize me," I admitted. "That she'll try to control my parenting the way she tried to control everything else. That she'll treat my child the way she treated me. Those are valid concerns, Dr. Levine acknowledged. "What boundaries would need to be in place for you to feel comfortable with her involvement in your child's life?" I spent weeks contemplating this question. By the time we confirmed the pregnancy was viable and progressing well at 12 weeks, I had my answer. I wanted my child to know their grandparents, but only under conditions that ensured emotional safety. I wrote Catherine a carefully worded email. "Mom, I have news I'd like to share. But before I do, we need to address what happened at my wedding and the overall pattern of our relationship. I'm open to meeting with you and Dad, preferably with a family therapist present, to discuss how we might move forward in a healthier way. If you're willing to participate in this process, please let me know and I'll arrange a session." Her response came the next day. Surprisingly restrained, almost clinical. "Hannah, I'm willing to meet as you suggest. Your father and I are available at your convenience." With Dr. Levine's help, I found a family therapist specializing in intergenerational conflict. Our first session was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in March, when I would be 14 weeks pregnant. Still early, but past the highest risk period. As James and I drove to the therapist's office, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. "What if nothing changes?" I asked. "What if she's incapable of acknowledging how she's hurt me?" "Then we'll know we tried," James replied simply, "and we'll make decisions about moving forward with that knowledge." My parents were already seated in the therapist's waiting room when we arrived. My father looking uncomfortable but hopeful, my mother perfectly composed in an expensive suit as if attending a business meeting rather than a family therapy session. Dr. Rivera, the family therapist, established ground rules for our conversation. One person speaking at a time, no interrupting focus on feelings rather than accusations. She asked each of us to share our perspective on the current situation without blame. I spoke first, describing my experience of our relationship. The constant criticism, the impossibility of meeting expectations, the absence of unconditional love, and finally, the devastating comment at my wedding that had been the breaking point. My father listened with visible distress, occasionally wiping his eyes. Catherine sat rigidly, her expression neutral until I finished speaking. "May I respond?" she asked Dr. Rivera, who nodded. "Hannah has always been extraordinarily sensitive," she began in a measured tone. "What she perceives as criticism was always intended as guidance. As her mother, it's my responsibility to help her achieve her potential, which sometimes requires pointing out areas for improvement." "And the comment at the wedding?" Dr. Rivera prompted gently. Catherine hesitated, her perfect composure slipping slightly. I was frustrated. The wedding wasn't what I had envisioned for my only daughter. I may have said something in the heat of the moment that I didn't mean. "That's not an apology," I noted quietly. "That's a justification." "What would an appropriate apology look like to you, Hannah?" Dr. Rivera asked. "Acknowledgement of the hurt caused. Taking responsibility without qualifiers like, 'if you were hurt,' or 'you misunderstood.' And a commitment to different behavior moving forward." Catherine's lips thinned. "You're asking me to admit to being a terrible mother when I've only ever wanted the best for you. I'm asking you to see how your actions have affected me, regardless of your intentions," I clarified. My father finally spoke. "Catherine, I was there for Hannah's childhood too. She's not exaggerating. You were extremely hard on her. Nothing was ever good enough. I should have intervened more often, and I'm sorry I didn't, Hannah." His unexpected support seemed to unbalance Catherine. For perhaps the first time in my life, I saw genuine confusion in her expression, as if she truly couldn't reconcile her perception with ours. The session continued with difficult but necessary conversation. No miraculous breakthrough occurred, but small cracks appeared in Catherine's defensive armor. Moments where she seemed to actually hear what we were saying, rather than immediately formulating rebuttals. As our time ended, Dr. Rivera asked if we wanted to schedule another session. We all agreed to continue the process, which I took as a positive sign. Before leaving, I shared my news. "There's another reason I wanted to address these issues now," I said, placing a protective hand over my still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant! You're going to be grandparents!" The announcement landed with palpable impact. My father's face lit up with genuine joy, while Catherine's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, calculation, and something that might have been happiness. "Under what conditions, she asked Eva, the attorney. "Healthy ones," I replied firmly. "I won't expose my child to the same criticism and conditional love I experienced. I want you both in this baby's life, but only if you can respect boundaries and support my parenting decisions." "That seems reasonable," my father said quickly before Catherine could respond. "Doesn't it, Catherine?" After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "I suppose we all want what's best for the child." It wasn't enthusiastic acceptance, but it was a starting point. As we left the therapist's office, my father hugged me tightly. "I'm so happy about the baby," he whispered, "and proud of you for standing up for yourself. It's long overdue." Catherine maintained her distance, offering a stiff congratulation, but no physical affection. Still, she had agreed to continue therapy and acknowledged my boundaries, however reluctantly. More progress than I'd expected from our first session. The following months brought gradual, imperfect change. We continued family therapy twice monthly, sometimes making progress, sometimes retreading old patterns. Catherine struggled to offer genuine apologies or admit wrongdoing, but she did begin making observable efforts to modify her behavior. My pregnancy progressed healthily, the growing life inside me providing powerful motivation to maintain boundaries despite the emotional toll. When we learned we were having a girl, I felt both joy and renewed determination that my daughter would grow up with unconditional love and support. "I'm scared of repeating patterns," I confessed to James one night as we assembled the nursery crib. "What if I'm critical of her the way my mother was with me?" "The fact that you're worried about it means you're already breaking the cycle," he reassured me. "You're aware in a way your mother never was." As my due date approached, Catherine's behavior shifted in unexpected ways. She sent thoughtful gifts for the baby. Not the elaborate and practical items I would have expected, but practical things we actually needed. She asked permission before offering suggestions about the nursery or baby preparations. And during a particularly vulnerable moment at one therapy session, she made a statement that astonished me. "I don't want to lose you," she said, addressing me directly instead of speaking through the therapist as usual. "And I don't want to miss knowing my granddaughter. I'm trying to understand where things went wrong, even if I don't always agree with your perception." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of her behavior, but it was the most honest communication we'd had in my entire life. When Lily Catherine James was born on a bright September morning after 23 hours of labour, James called my parents from the hospital. They arrived 2 hours later, my father bearing flowers, my mother carrying a small gift bag, and an expression of uncharacteristic uncertainty. "She's beautiful," my father said, tears in his eyes as he gazed at his granddaughter. Catherine stood slightly apart watching. When I offered to let her hold the baby, genuine emotion flickered across her face. "Are you sure?" she asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Yes," I replied. "She should meet her grandmother." As Catherine carefully cradled Lily, something shifted in her expression, softening the sharp edges, warming the cool assessment I was accustomed to seeing. "She has your eyes," she observed quietly, "and hopefully a much easier time with her mother than I had with mine." I replied the statement direct but not unkind. Catherine looked up, holding my gaze. "I hope so too," she said simply. The months following Lily's birth brought continued evolution in our family dynamics. Catherine still occasionally slipped into critical comments or controlling suggestions, but now I addressed them immediately rather than internalizing the hurt. Sometimes she recognized her behavior and adjusted. Other times she became defensive. But the pattern was changing slowly but meaningfully. What surprised me most was how differently she behaved with Lily compared to how she'd treated me. She was patient, attentive, even playful, qualities I'd rarely experienced from her. During one visit, when Lily was 6 months old, I watched my mother get down on the floor to play peekaboo, completely unconcerned about wrinkling her expensive outfit. "You're so good with her," I commented, unable to hide my surprise. Catherine paused, looking thoughtful. "She's easier to love than you were," she said, then immediately raised a hand, seeing my expression. "That came out wrong. What I meant was, it's easier to love unconditionally when there aren't expectations attached." I projected so much onto you, my ambitions, my regrets, my need for validation. I'm trying not to make the same mistake with Lily. It was perhaps the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard from my mother. In therapy the following week, I asked Dr. Rivera about this apparent transformation. Becoming a grandparent sometimes offers people a second chance at family relationships, she explained. The stakes feel different. The pressure is reduced. And sometimes seeing their child become a parent triggers reflection about their own parenting choices. Whatever the reason, I was grateful for Catherine's effort, even while maintaining healthy boundaries. My father, too, seemed to find new purpose in grandparenthood, becoming more assertive in family dynamics and less focused on keeping the peace at all costs. On Lily's first birthday, we hosted a small celebration at our home. As I watched my mother helping her granddaughter unwrap presents, patiently without taking over or criticizing the baby's clumsy attempts, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. Walking away from my wedding reception after my mother's cruel words had been the hardest and bravest thing I'd ever done. Not physically walking away in that moment, but emotionally walking away from patterns that had damaged me for decades, refusing to accept treatment that diminished my worth, demanding respect as a condition of relationship. That choice, to value myself enough to set boundaries even with the people who should have loved me most, had changed everything. It hadn't magically fixed my mother or erased years of pain. Catherine was still Catherine with all her complicated flaws. But my response to her had fundamentally changed, and with it, the dynamic between us. Later that evening, after guests had left and Lily was asleep, Catherine lingered, helping clean up, despite James's assurances it wasn't necessary. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, she spoke without looking at me. "I've never properly apologized for what I said at your wedding," she began, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "The therapist says I use justifications instead of apologies, because admitting fault feels like failure to me. But I was wrong to say that, Hannah. I've never regretted having you, not really. I regretted my own inadequacies as a mother, and I projected that onto you. I'm sorry." The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear rendered me momentarily speechless. They didn't erase the past or guarantee a perfect future, but they acknowledged a truth that had shaped both our lives. "Thank you," I finally managed. "That means a lot to me." We continued washing dishes in companionable silence. Not entirely comfortable, but not adversarial either. Progress, not perfection. That night, as I checked on Lily before bed, watching her peaceful sleep in the soft glow of her nightlight, I marveled at how differently her life would unfold because of choices I had made. She would grow up knowing her worth wasn't tied to achievement. She would understand that love shouldn't require earning. She would see her mother modeling self-respect and healthy boundaries. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply walk away from what hurts us, not in anger or retribution, but in serene recognition of our own value. Sometimes the greatest revenge against those who wound us is creating a life so full of joy and authenticity that their power to cause pain diminishes to nothing. I didn't walk away to punish my mother. I walked away to save myself, and in doing so, I created the possibility for something new and healthier to grow in the space between us. Not just for me, but for the next generation. Has a toxic family relationship shaped your life? Have you found the courage to set boundaries or walk away from harmful patterns? Your story matters and could help someone else struggling with similar challenges. Please share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's the first step toward the life and relationships you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your own journey lead to healing however it unfolds.